He hate hau e wawara. He tiu he raki, he tiu he raki. Nāna ia mai te puputara ki he kiota. E tiki nā tū au te kōtū, ko i te pau whakairo ka tū, ki te wai te mata, i oku wairangi e. E ti hea wā mauri ora. I aku nui, i aku rahi. Koutou ngā raukura ahurei, ko tai ki tērā taumata nui. Nau mai, haere mai, whakatau mai. Nau mai ki tēnei, pō whakanui. Ki tēnei kaupapa huia kai manoa, ki te whakanui, te kāhui raukura. Rātou i tukun tō rātou pai, tō rātou pukinga ki te ao. I ngā raukura ahurei a tēnā koutou. Hara mai i rungi te karanga o Waipapa Taumata rau. Hara mai. Whakatau mai i rungi te manaakitanga a Ngāti Whātua Rākei ki te pokapū o Tāmaki Makaurau nei. I raro te tirohanga o ngā maunga whakahi e karanga atu ki a koutou. Whakatau mai, whakatau mai, whakatau mai rā. Tātai whetū ki te rangi, mau tonu rā. Tātai tangata ki te whenua, ngaro noa. Au e rā, taukiri tia roha e. E ngā mate katoa, haere, haere, haere atu rā. Rātou kia rātou, e noho i wainga nui ngā mātua tupuna. Haere, tātou kia tātou ki tēnei ao tūroa. E hui hui mai nei, ki te whakanui tēnei kaupapa o tātou, tēnā koutou, a tēnā tātou katoa. Katua hau, ki te whāriki hia te korowai manaaki, ki ngā raukura ahurei hou, ki ngā kai whiwhi, no mua, ki ngā whānau, ki ngā hoa, ki tēnei poa. E tika ana te kōrero no ngā mātua tupuna. He whetū ko tahi noa, engari ki tēnei pō, toko rima e piata tana. Nā reira, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of our Interim Vice-Chancellor, Professor Frank Bloomfield, and all of the team here, gathered to celebrate our Distinguished Alumni for 2026, he mihi nui nui kia tātou katoa, nā reira tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Please welcome our host for this evening, journalist and broadcaster, Jack Tame.
E mihi ana ki te rangi, e mihi ana ki te whenua, e mihi ana ki ngā tupuna i te pō. E mihi ana ki ngā uri i te awātea, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ore te iwi, kua tai mai te pō nei, nau mai haere mai ki Taumata, i te Waipapa Taumata rau i te tau 2020. Ki te haukainga o te wahi nei, Ngāti Whātua o Rākei, tēnā koutou katoa. I te rangatira, e Michael, tēnā koe i te whakatau tino mahana i te pō nei. Ko tēnei te whakamoimiti mō ngā kai whakarite o te hui, ki ngā tauira, ngā ākonga kua tai mai, haere, haere, haere. Kia tātou, kia pai i tēnei whakanui. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Good evening. I just acknowledge the sky, the earth, our ancestors before us. I acknowledge mana whenua here, Ngāti Whātua o Rākei, and I welcomed you all here for Taumata 2026. Waipapa Taumata Rau, the University of Auckland's Distinguished Alumni Awards. Last week, Anthropic, which is one of those monolithic American tech companies released a new AI model called Mythos. Except they didn't release it. Unlike their other models, you and I can't go online and start asking it ridiculous questions. Instead, they gave out $100 million in credits to some of the biggest and most important companies in the world to use their model for free. The reason is that even though they didn't specifically design this model with cybersecurity in mind, it has proven so good, so effective at finding cybersecurity vulnerabilities, they figured they couldn't release it to the general public. For issues of public safety, they had to go to these big companies first and let them work out their own issues. And when I say big companies and important software, I mean the biggest and most important stuff. The kind of software that makes the internet work. The stuff that protects your bank account. And here's the thing, if Anthropic is to be believed, and that is a bit of an if, these companies are known for blowing a little bit of smoke, but if they are to be believed, this AI system they have developed didn't just find the bugs. It didn't just identify the bugs. Autonomously, it created working exploits for the bugs. So it wasn't just that it realized the bank's vault could be unlocked. Acting autonomously, it could open the bank's vault, remove the bullion, and then drive off in a getaway car into the night. The White House and the head of the US Federal Reserve called an urgent meeting with the CEOs of the biggest banks in the United States the next day, urging them to interrogate the security of their operations. Now, if you are anything like me, you find this simultaneously thrilling and absolutely terrifying. Who knows? As this technology is refined and further empowered and developed, what it might make for the world we know. But AI, of course, is just one of the big disruptors that we are all facing. Just one of the big disruptors rearing up before us. Add to it the fraying global order, the feuding superpowers, climate change, populism, demographic shifts. There is every reason to think that the world we know is on the cusp of profound and unsettling change. How do you prepare for that? How do you prepare for change on that scale? How do you fortify yourself against the unknown? How do you seize the opportunity that change can present? Well, I think of my granny. There she is. My granny, and I called her granny. She chose that. So my granny grew up on a remote sheep station in inland South Australia, hundreds of kilometres from the ocean. When she was a girl, in the late 1920s and early 1930s, they would take the wool from her station on a camel train to get it to market. That's a photo from her station. It was remote, and there weren't many opportunities for connection. Once in a while, a real train, not a camel train, would pull up at the closest track some 5 or 10 miles away, and they would get tea and sugar. But she grew up in the shadow of the Depression. There was no electricity, there was no refrigerator, and education was very, very tricky. She had to learn via correspondence for the first few years of her life. It was remote, it was dusty, and it was very lonely. But when she was a teenager, my granny was shipped off to boarding school. When she arrived at boarding school, she was alarmed to discover that chemistry and physics were reserved only for the boys. But my granny was a stubborn thing. She dug in her heels. They decided to let her study chemistry and physics. She was the dux of her school. She did a PhD in physics. And then she turned her attention to an exciting new field called computing. My granny was her university's first lecturer in an exciting new field called computer science. She studied and ended up teaching punch cards and paper tape, so the theories and processes that over the space of 85 or 90 years led all the way from Alan Turing at Bletchley Park to that meeting at the White House last week. The CEOs of the biggest banks in the world contemplating an autonomous computing model so powerful that it could potentially throw the internet and global economies into chaos. If you zoom out enough, it's a straight line. Punch cards and paper tape all the way to mythos. My granny died in 2022, the same year that most of us first heard of a company called OpenAI. Her 95 years stretched from a time when her father would drive camels across the desert to get his wool to market to ChatGPT. And I just think it is a very, very good reminder that ours is not the first generation to confront profound change. And perhaps, just perhaps, the best way to ride that change, to fortify yourself against the unknown, is to do what my granny did and embrace, thirst after, and love education. I really think that's it. I think it is the salve in a volatile world. Education isn't just preparation for a known future. Education is the capacity to navigate an unknown future. I don't know about you, but I reckon perhaps we don't have enough celebrations in life sometimes. We are all so busy in our own worlds that we don't pause nearly regularly enough and celebrate the things that are important to us. And that is what makes Taumata such an important occasion. This is a celebration that so many within the university community look forward to every year. Tonight is a celebration of education and the wonders it unlocks, and it is a celebration of excellence. As you will hear, each of our distinguished alumni has achieved in their respective field at an extraordinary level. If my granny was sitting here this evening, she'd be saying, "Why can't you be more like those guys?" As Frank Blomfield, the university's interim vice-chancellor, noted yesterday, each has been a leader in their respective field. And while in many or most ways their chosen careers really could not be more different, physics, business, music, law, art, they share a common connection. They each embraced education and they studied at Waipapa Taumata Rau, the University of Auckland. So with that, I will ask that you ensure your phone is on silent. I will ask that you remember, if there is an emergency, to listen to the theatre staff here. And let's meet our first recipient.
If I had to describe Ellen to someone who hadn't met her, I would say she's a person who considers the way she goes about life very carefully.
She's a very honourable person, very trustworthy. She is understated. People underestimate her, but they do that to their peril because she is someone who has an intellect like a steel trap.
She's one of the cleverest women I know, a magnificent sister-in-law and a remarkable friend. When my brother was admitted to the High Court, which was a few years after Ellen, described her as being his shining light.
When I was president of the Court of Appeal, Ellen was the next most senior judge, so whenever there was a problem, she was the person I consulted. She was not only supportive, but she was also clear, and if she thought I was wrong, she said it quite clearly. I think that's wrong. She's very much a straight shooter.
It's a career which suited her because of her strong moral and social conscience and her sense of natural justice.
The main value for a Supreme Court judge is really intellectual ability, analytical ability, and she demonstrated she had those in spades.
I've learnt from Ellen the value of hard work, but also taking time to enjoy your family and having fun. Every Christmas, for as long as I can remember, Ellen has made these customised Christmas crackers. She has added gifts, even jokes that are personalised. Everybody loves them. Yeah, I don't know how she has time to do all that amazing stuff, and it's so impressive. She really always has time for her family, and that speaks to her character.
Tonight's first award winner will receive her medallion from Annabelle Kay, currently an honours student in the Faculty of Law. Annabelle was a coach of the winning mediation team at the 2026 International Commercial Mediation Competition in Paris. She is past president of the Women in Law Club. Please welcome Annabelle and Distinguished Alumna, Honourable Justice Alan France.
They gave you the jazzed up Vivaldi for that one, didn't they? Yeah. They just gave it a little techno edge. I don't know what that says about you. The Honourable Justice Dame Alan France? I'm going to be very cheeky here. Is that the correct order?
Yes, I think so.
I think
The Chief Justice is here. She can...
she can correct me.
Yeah.
Yes, I think I've calculated that you have at least twice as many letters before your name now than you have as part of your name. So I think we can all safely agree that you're a deserving alumna. It is 20 years since the Supreme Court was established, replacing the Privy Council as New Zealand's final court of appeal. The court today considers some of the biggest questions about what makes us us. That's why we moved away from the Privy Council, right? So in the time you've been with the Supreme Court, what have you come to better appreciate about New Zealand?
Well, I think in terms of our law, I think it's based on sound principles, generally speaking. I'm not saying there aren't areas for improvement, but I think you would say we punch well above our weight in terms of our jurisprudence and so on. It's
a tricky role in that 5 justices rule over cases. There are dissenting views from time to time. How do you find that from an intellectual perspective, going into a space where you know your colleagues may disagree?
That's one of the things I've enjoyed with appellate work, both on the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. It's never ceased to amaze me. You'll have some ideas, preliminary ideas about a case, and then one of your colleagues will ask a question, and suddenly it'll be like a light bulb moment going off. Well, why didn't I think of that? So I think it's a good process for developing and deciding the law. I think we benefit from that exchange of ideas, and I think it would be a lesser system without that.
Don't you think that a genuine willingness to change one's mind is an underrated quality in this day and age?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you foster that? How do you nurture that?
Well, I think you encourage people to listen. It's by listening to, and I think you'd find everyone on the court, the Supreme Court would say that you might have some ideas about a particular case, and then when you hear good argument from counsel, you change your mind. You know, you can do a complete about face, if you know what I mean. But
you grew up in Northland. I haven't gone and checked it, but I can't imagine there are many Supreme Court justices who were educated at Okaiho College.
No.
Not many. Yeah. And your parents were teachers.
Yes.
So what was it about those formative years, enjoying all of the wonders that Northland has, the barefoot running around, the trips to the beach, that also managed to foster in you this passion?
Well, we had a great childhood as we moved around quite a lot because my parents did a lot of what they used to call country service. I think in terms of what I've done subsequently, I think it gave me a better idea about the different communities that whose cases we're looking at whilst in court. We went as far afield as the Chatham Islands. My two sisters were born there. I don't have a great deal of memory about those times, but I think it all does build a better understanding and awareness of different communities, how different places operate and so on.
And how do you take that knowledge and apply it to your work today?
I guess having an open mind, I guess being conscious of the fact that you're always not the only way, and reading as widely as you can to come to grips with what it is you're dealing with.
You mentioned your parents moved around a bit. They were teachers, and you've said you're, quote, a firm believer in the importance of public service, that you want to do the job well, quote, because it affects people's lives. I'm no expert, but I feel like private practice probably pays a little bit more justice. So where does that public service conviction come from?
Well, I think my parents were exemplars of that in their teaching careers and in the values that they instilled in us. And then having worked quite a lot in the public service, I'm a very big believer in you're there to serve in whatever way you can.
Were you tempted to go to the other side of things and go private at some point?
No.
You answered that quickly. You said that you think your parents maybe bumped you towards public service through the kind of values that they instilled in you. How did they do that?
Well, I suppose how does any parent sort of instill those values in their children? But leading by example, they were pretty selfless in the way they raised us and in the teaching work that they did.
You didn't just find an education at Waipapa Taumata. You found a husband.
Yes.
Describe to us what you and Simon, your late husband, tell us about what you were like at university.
Well, I gave a little talk to the law school the other day as part of the Alumni Awards exercise, and was talking to one of my fellow law students who said, I remember the two of you sitting close together in class, although in fact we were in different streams, but because of different surnames. It was alphabetical, but we had a lot of good fun, and it was wonderful to be able to debate legal issues with someone who had a good idea about what you were talking about.
Tell us about the debates.
Well, I would probably generally come off second best, but
I'm not sure I believe that. Yeah, was it a common thing? I mean, it must have been a remarkable experience to have parallel careers in that sense. I think you were the first married couple to both sit as High Court justices. Simon was appointed to the Court of Appeal. So who was more valuable in indoor netball?
Well, he was a very sporty person.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
But was it a common occurrence that you would debate issues around the table?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't always all law talk by any manner of means. But and particularly because we spent quite a number of years when we were both working at Crown Law, so obviously we had a lot of discussion about cases we were working on and so on. We did appear together in one memorable case in the Court of Appeal where I just couldn't understand why it was that he was so messy in court. He was he was very efficient, but the books were piled up everywhere,
And you hadn't seen that before?
No.
So what did you say?
Well, just trying to keep us on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, there was hell to pay that night, I can imagine. I know it's been a couple of years now since you lost him, but how do you reflect on those decades together now with a little bit of space?
Well, I think we were both very lucky, and I like to think that by working together as we often did, we both achieved better results than we might have, on our own, as it were.
Yeah.
But I would stress, and a lot of good times. He had a great sense of humour.
Yeah. I've got to mention the firsts, because there are a lot of firsts. So you were the first woman appointed President of the Court of Appeal. You presided over the first all-female Court of Appeal bench in New Zealand history, sitting with Justice French and Justice Winkleman. Then in 2017, the Supreme Court sat as a female majority bench for the first time, believed to be the first final appellate court in the Commonwealth, possibly the world, to do so. So I managed to look it up. When you graduated from law school, about a quarter of law graduates in New Zealand were women. Today it's 2/3. And there are many people who would say that you have played a really significant role in those changing numbers. So how do you reflect on that?
Well, in thinking about that, I do think that I had the benefit of the trailblazers who went before me, and I think of Augusta Wallace, the first woman district court judge, Dame Sylvia Cartwright, first chief district court judge, Dame Shana Elias and Dame Lowell Goddard, the first women QCs, and then my current colleagues as well, the Chief Justice and Justice Glazebrook, both of whom are distinguished alumni. I think by the time I started at law school, well, as you say, women in the law, that we were no longer the exception. But I like to think that by showing that women can, as our mother always used to say, do anything, by achieving what I have done, that it is an example, and that young women will think, well, if she can do it, so can I.
We should be extraordinarily proud. Please join me in congratulating our first distinguished alumna, the Honourable Justice Dame Ellen France.
Thank you, and go that way. Yeah.
Now let's meet our next recipient.
I knew art was going to be a big part of Reuben's life, even when we were teenagers at Maclean's College. He was my best friend. We were 15, and there was an air about Reuben. He had his sights set on more than what that place could give us.
You know when you meet Reuben because you feel Reuben. He brings so much beauty and love and light into any space, and I think that's reflected in his artwork. He invites you into his work because it's so playful.
When I see Guy Kairahi, I just can't think of anything else but Reuben. It's occupying space really simply and elegantly. It's drawing attention to itself, but it's also reflecting light around itself. It doesn't get much more Reuben than that.
That was a phenomenal piece of work, and I was right there when he finally got to see the piece, and it was just breathtaking. If I could just envelop myself in a bit of Reuben Paterson every day, I would.
He's one of the few contemporary Māori artists who's been able to build such a life for himself, to be able to live solely as an artist, to be able to traject himself overseas into New York City and maintain a life there and continue that practice. That's a big deal for any artist, regardless of where they're from.
He has such a strong work ethic, and that's something that started a very long time ago, and that's something that's continued. It's always been there. His art came first.
I had the pleasure of calling Reuben when he became a laureate for the Arts Foundation. He cried on the phone. He didn't realise that he was that deserving. I think that says everything about Reuben Paterson. He is more than deserving. He is a fantastic creative genius.
Our second award will be presented by Brittany Smith, a doctoral candidate at Elam's School of Fine Arts. Brittany's study includes engagement with Reuben Paterson's art practice. She's won the Eden Arts Award and was a finalist in the Gow Langsford Art Prize. Her work has appeared in solo and group exhibitions in New Zealand and Australia. Welcome Brittany and Distinguished Alumnus Reuben Paterson.
Who wants to be a millionaire? I said to Reuben before today that I wouldn't ask him any curly questions, but I was straight up lying. Because I've got a really curly question to kick things off. Titanomagnetite.
Yes, let's go.
Titanomagnetite. Do you have any idea what titanomagnetite is?
I imagine it's something that sparkles very beautifully.
It is something that sparkles very beautifully. It is a mineral with titanium and iron oxide that is found predominantly on the west coast beaches of New Zealand. Your work sparkles in both a figurative and very literal sense. Everyone who knows your work knows glitter. And you've said that Piha is the place where the glitter began. Take us back there.
It was, I was very lucky to grow up on the west coast. And back in the 70s, as a younger boy, those west coast sands were a lot darker and richer with this
titanomagnetite
mineral you were just describing to us. It was much richer with this, and it was darker and it was hotter on our little boys' feet. And the beauty of growing up around such a sparkling material, especially with the sun hitting the sea, was that we were growing up in a very glittering landscape, and set against, of course, glitter I'm using as a material now, which of course is plastic. I think it just honours that we can find things as joyous and sparkling right here in our beaches.
You have said that glitter for you is a metaphor for spiritual light. You think of it in the tradition of religious art, if you like, where light signified the divine. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, well, I think it's a very timely way to bring up art history, because the education system is, of course, looking at removing art history from secondary school programs. And thank you for allowing me this platform. And
I'm presuming that you're not supporting this decision. I just want to double check that.
One of my very deep and passionate loves for art comes from the discourse and from the education of art history. And it's going to be many universities' job to have to pick up where these kids are being left off and left out. So, of course, art history begins with the iconography and the religious stories of Jesus Christ and God. And there is no better visual metaphor than the glowing light as the beacon and the unknown. And I think those are the qualities that I find incredibly interesting about creating light work.
It's really interesting to think about the different inspirations, if you will, for that light. You have the spiritual side of things, but when I think of glitter, I think of my 9-year-old with it in his hair, right? And I think a lot of people would be the same. You think of kids' craft, you think of carnivals, you think of drag. And you have embraced all of that as well, which is the amazing thing. Your work has always been part of a queer visual conversation. Last year, you received the Toi Ko Iri Iri Queer Arts Award alongside your Arts Foundation Laureate. So how do those two things, the spiritual and the queer, the sacred and the celebratory, sit together in your work?
It's the beauty of trying to migrate the many relationships that we are born into as biracial children, and finding a place for ourselves within all of these magnificently beautiful places. Some are Scottish, some are Pākehā, and some are Māori. But for personal identities, around sexuality, I've got to embroider them into this magnificent quilt, which is everybody's personal story in life. So it's just an inevitability. We all want to know who we are. We all want to learn how to express that with value. So I've just had to find a way to weave it all together, I guess.
I want to ask about two specific pieces. I think you had been travelling for a couple of years. You came back to New Zealand in 2000. Your father had died just a couple of months later, and you made the wharenui that Dad built in his memory, and it was your breakout work. It reimagined ko whai patterns in glitter, and that piece sort of feels like it was a time in which, or a moment in which everything came together, as it were. Grief, whakapapa, the medium, the meaning of the medium. Can you tell us about making that work?
Yeah, it is actually, it will always maintain top spot for me as my favourite work. After Dad's passing, I think that you can't help but feel that maybe life is going to leave you in grief, but making a work for my father gave me the absolute opposite. He gave me the very beginning of a career. So I feel very blessed that in creating a portrait of him, and that's, I guess, where the material of glitter does its best. It celebrates something, not necessarily grieves it, has given me this trajectory that's led me to the seat sitting with you tonight next to you in front of a very beautiful audience. So it's I'll be endlessly grateful for what Dad could give me forever. I think it just acknowledges that when our loved ones are gone, they're not missing, they're around just doing this other special type of work for us.
The second piece I wanted to ask about, we saw in your video, Guide Kaiarahi outside Auckland Art Gallery, Toi or Tamaki. It's amazing. I remember going there for the first time and being like, whoa, it is spectacular. 595 crystals, 10 metres high, the Phantom Waka above Lake Tarawera. It had to be fabricated, though, in Australia during COVID, which means you had to have oversight via Zoom. So tell me about the moment when you're there and the blindfold gets whipped off for the first time and you see it in person.
Chelsea Winstanley did record that moment, and it was a very emotional moment. But of course, the story of Guide Kaiarahi is about the Phantom Waka and the apparition that appeared before Te Paia Hinerangi Guide Sophia on Lake Tarawera, 11 days before the eruption of Mount Tarawera. And I always look for the magical moments within the making. And although we had all been shut down into COVID, we were working together through a new type of trust, which was broken screens, and working through screens is very difficult with a clear medium. Everything was invisible. Yeah. But I felt that we ourselves we'd become apparitions on screens instead. So there were these themes of the phantom that seemed to be returning as the work was being made.
Yeah. Where's the weirdest place you've found glitter?
Do you really want me to?
Yeah. Be very careful what I ask here, yes.
Were you thinking that, or did you say that out loud? It's like, you know the weirdest place that I've found.
You've found glitter in some weird places.
I mean, I think we've got that next question.
Yes.
Where's the weirdest place you've found
No,
glitter?
we needn't go there. Yeah, it's, yeah. You've been in New York for 3 years now?
3 years, yes.
What has New York unlocked for you?
I think New York, I decided to go to New York because I think as artists, we spend a lot of our careers living in discomfort, maybe working to what we think is comfort. And I was beginning to find comfort. And comfort basically means paying the bills.
Can't have that.
Being responsible, acknowledging you're an adult. But I felt that was constraining the purpose of the life of the work. And I do think that we live symbiotic relationships. I'm in a relationship with making and creating. And the greatest thing that I want for that work is for it to live its biggest life. So when Guide Kaiarahi was completed, I wasn't really sure where we could go within New Zealand from there, and had an opportunity to take up that dream. And it was a dream that a friend of mine had mentioned. I'd said at Elam Art School, stuff this place, I'm going to go to New York. And all these years later, it does happen. But I think some of the greatest gifts that New York has given me so far is the feeling of freedom, because nobody is there to care about you. You're there to care for yourself first, and I know that you'll understand that feeling, having lived in New York. But what followed up from the feeling of freedom was the feeling of bravery that I could take into the studio. So I feel like with those two things, I've set a really good path for the next part of my arts life.
It's liberation, as it were. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask I finished by asking you about a quote I dug up. You said, quote, "You can only ever have glitter in the plural. There's never a glitter." How do you apply that to your life?
How do I apply that to my life? Well, I guess I can never exist as a creative person in the singular. It definitely involves being supported very deeply and helped along. So, as I stand, as I sit here with you, taking this incredible acknowledgement, it doesn't come singularly. It definitely comes as a very big plural of a lot of people who've supported me, helped me, and made sure to guide me, to my dreams.
We really appreciate you being here. Please join me in
Thank you.
congratulating Reuben Paterson.
Thank you.
Let us meet our next recipient.
Growing up in Auckland, in a rugby-mad household, singing was never one of the options for Moses. But because his passion spoke louder than he could sing, it just happened.
He came out with his school choir and you could have heard a pin drop. Thousands of school children filling the town hall, and this young man held the stage in a way that still to this day resonates as a memory.
It was always music, writing it, singing it, acting. That is very much him as a child.
He came to me when he was 17. He was already understanding what to do with the musical notes on the page, just really committed to the artistry of music in a way that is unusual for his age.
He studied his bachelor's here, then was hand-selected for the Wales International Academy of Voice. We needed to fundraise to make those studies happen overseas, so we created this group called Solo Mio.
The first tour going around little tiny venues, and then the third tour we finished up in the hugest arenas in the country.
It's just been a wild ride. His debut album, Grace, which he wrote, is very personal. It's a slice of home, it's a slice of him, it's a slice of our family, all put into music.
He's really normalized classical music. He's taken the elitism out of it. But he also opens up viable pathways for all singers to have a career that is diverse and interesting.
He's a seeker. He's never content with being told that this is the way that it's always been done. That's somewhere Moses is exploring now, how film and literature and art are all ultimately interlinked.
His storytelling is particularly authentic. It is about his voice, but it's about him as a person. He has X factor, for sure.
When Moses sings, there's something about his voice that doesn't just go into your ears, it goes into your soul.
Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, Distinguished Alumnus Moses Mackay cannot join us in person tonight. Instead, he'll beam in from Milan in Italy to talk with Jack. Matthias Mackay, Moses' brother, will accept the award on his behalf. Presenting the medallion is Bella Allen Moitoa, a classical mezzo-soprano studying for a Bachelor of Arts in Education and a Bachelor of Music in Classical Voice. Bella is an experienced choral and solo performer. She won first place under 21 at the 2025 Rotorua New Zealand Aria competition. Please welcome Bella and Matthias Mackay.
Malo lavo, uso, oame oi.
Malo, can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Oh my God, I feel very emotional watching that. That was I didn't expect to see that video. I felt full of emotions. Well, thank you.
We're feeling full of emotions. Anytime they say Moses can't be here because he's in Milan, everyone's going, oh, okay, well, here we go. Hey, I had not appreciated this about you, Moses, but you were born with poor hearing. How does a boy who is born with poor hearing go on to become an internationally celebrated musician?
You know, I think when you're born with something that is, I guess, seen as a disability for a lot of people, for me, it became my little thing, my little secret. And I think for me, it became a thing that I would lean more into. And sounds, you know, some people hear music. I hear sounds. I hear very intricate sounds. So I'm very sensitive to things. And so for me, it was never a disability. It became a thing that I was able to use to listen to people. Not what they say, but listen to what people's energy, I suppose you could say, on a very level.
In a musical sense, how did you work with that? I mean, you said you were 9 or 10 years old before your hearing began to improve in an environment where you were surrounded by music and surrounded by singing. So were you off key? How did that work?
I was raised in a family where everyone sung. It was a part of our culture. Brothers sung, cousins sung, uncles, aunties, everyone's singing. And so for me, one of the best memories I have growing up was being in a room of my entire family singing. And there was just a vibration that was around. And for me, it was, at that point, I didn't have hearing disabilities. At that point, I was very much like everyone else. So in terms of music, going into my teenage years and leaning into that, it became more interesting because when I went to study and I went to sing with the New Zealand Youth Choir, I started meeting people who also had this fascination for music. I suppose that's what you could say New Zealand, the University of Auckland was for me. It was like a meeting ground of like-minded people who are also music geeks.
Yeah. You found your tribe. I think that story and experience has been repeated so many times over the years. And it's funny, though, how those little moments come to define us. I think you were 18 when Andrea Bocelli sang here. You were in the backing choir supporting him at the time. Do you remember what he sung, and do you remember how it made you feel?
I remember it like it was yesterday. I was 18 years old, and I was one of the youngsters sitting in the choir, and there was one song called Canto della Terra, which translates into the Song of the Earth. And it was a magnificent moment where it was me, a full orchestra, and then this one man standing in front singing this song. And I remember standing there with the music. I was meant to sing. I couldn't sing. I had lost my voice. I was so moved by this moment that I remember getting to the end of that song. It was in Victor Arena, which was now Spark Arena. And I turned to the guy next to me, and I said to him, one day I want to do what he's doing. And then it was a few years later where Solomeo sold out Spark Arena. So it was a crazy whirlwind moment.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. You, Penny, and Mackay started Solomeo essentially as a fundraiser. You hired a school hall. It was half full. You were trying to raise money to go to Wales to study at the time, and within months you were selling out the Auckland Town Hall, you were signing to Universal Music, you were at Vector or Spark or whatever it's called, selling out stadiums. What was that feeling when something built almost accidentally starts to take on a life of its own?
That was a funny time. I was so young, and looking back to that moment, it felt really right, and it wasn't just about the music, it wasn't just about the fundraising, but we were lifting a culture. We were changing the culture of classical music, and we were bringing in a new wave of Polynesian singers and a new wave of Polynesian voices. And so for us, it felt so fresh. We felt like we were the front line of busting down some walls that needed to be busted down. And so it's so humbling for me now to see the next generation, a decade on, a whole wave of young singers coming through. For me, it just reminds me that there was a reason for everything. And for us, that moment was to be the trailblazers for something really special. So I'm very humbled, and I really understand my position in the flux of it all.
Do you ever reflect that perhaps that same feeling you had watching Andrea Bocelli is the feeling that other young Pacific singers have looking at Moses Mackay?
Totally, and I get pictures from people sending me images of them watching me on the TV from a recording 10 years ago, and to this day I still get it, and it's very humbling. I feel very blessed to be in the position where I see myself in so many other people coming through. And I guess that's the great beauty of it all. And being an artist is that you are just mirroring so many different things. I'm seeing myself in other people ahead of me, but I'm also seeing myself in a lot of people following me. So it's a beautiful position to be in.
You've been in one of the most successful musical acts this country has ever produced, the highest selling album in New Zealand 2 years running, multi-platinum, sold out tours. You could have stayed in that lane forever. But in 2023, you released Grace, your debut solo album, original songs written by you, profoundly personal. It went straight to #1 in New Zealand on debut. Why did you do that? What was the thing in you that wanted to follow that path?
I'm a real firm believer that I just want to get to the end, and I don't want it to sound like, heavy, but I really want to get to the end and look back and go, I did everything. I did everything that I wanted to do and I set out to do, and I did it. And there was music that was just sitting on my heart that needed to get out. And it was music that I started writing when I was 15, 16, 17, real old stuff that I really wanted the world to hear. And one of the first songs that I had written was a song called Grace. And it was a dedication to my grandmother, Anna Malia, who came from the islands of Samoa and came down to New Zealand for a better life. She had taken that big voyage, which back in the day, it was a big thing. And she started a life in New Zealand. And so I am the descendant of that journey. And now it's so funny for me sitting here in Italy, because I'm really just taking that flag. I'm really doing her work. I'm carrying on her legacy of being that traveler. the Voyager. And so it's very important for me to do things that are aligned to my heart, that are close to my heart, like releasing Grace. And so it happened, it went out, and I'm very proud of that, and on to the next.
It's interesting. I looked up the process for Grace, and after your grandma died, your hearing dramatically improved as a young boy. And you've said that you believe in a way it was her parting gift to you. You had been so close to her in your formative years. So how do you make sense of something like that?
You know, Jack, some things in life you just can't make sense of. And for me at that young age, there was such beauty and innocence around it that it wasn't even a thing. I didn't want to intellectualize it. I didn't understand it, but I just knew that when my nana got diagnosed with cancer, we were very close. She was almost like a second mother to me. You know, she really, really raised me. And when she got cancer and died, and it was on her deathbed, I remember running and showing her my new hearing aids. I said, look at these hearing aids, the new colors. And the following week, when I had to go get checked up because something was wrong, the audiologist literally sat me down and he said, you have 100% hearing. And I have no way to explain that. And I looked at him in his eye and I said, my nana gave it to me before she died. And there was conviction in a little kid of 10 years old saying that. There was conviction in that. And I don't know, you don't have to be spiritual, you don't have to, whatever. But for me, that was what happened. And so, yeah, like I said, I carry that legacy with me every day. It's a blessing that I can hear you.
Yeah. You've said you today.
Now I have. I said, now I have selective vision. Which is a whole other thing.
You've said today, Moses, that having been born in New Zealand, educated at the University of Auckland, living in Milan, you are, quote, living your grandparents' wildest dreams. How so?
Wow. The fact that I'm here, there's a beauty of being here on the other side of the world. I feel very like I am carrying on that legacy, but at the same time, I have to admit, there is a loneliness that comes with that. Being the first of, and I just pray and I hope that the next generation, I hope my family, my young nieces and nephews, that they are able to also follow these footsteps. I am my grandparents' dreams because they had dreams of traveling and seeing the world and taking their culture to the world. I mean, you probably see there's a big tapa clock behind me that was gifted to me that comes from the islands of Samoa. This bark right here, this piece of home, this little piece of home. And for me, this is, it's very special.
Moses, we very much appreciate you joining us from across the oceans. We know there's probably a cappuccino, a little pastry waiting for you somewhere nice, a little al fresco number somewhere, but please join me in congratulating Moses Mackay. Yeah. Let's meet our next recipient.
We had a good childhood. It was a free life. John was the youngest of 5 of us, and we had a big double garage at home. He used that as his little lab, and he used to blow a few things up in there. Probably Mum went grey before her time.
As a young student, John was very keen and eager to learn and was also very personable.
People often say, oh, he must have been exceptionally bright to do what he's done, but in fairness, he always was a hard worker, even from a young age.
The special thing about John was that he had many strings to his bow. He was not just an outstanding student, but he was an impersonator. He could write scripts for pantomimes that were produced by the department, and he was a rather nervous firewalker of all things.
At the University of Auckland, John is one of our heroes. He has inspired so many young scientists, not just to stretch their wings and become great scientists themselves, but also to lift their own ability to think and grow and learn and contribute.
You don't become president of the European Physical Society without being held in high esteem by your peers.
I think John's scientific legacy will be twofold. His body of work stands for itself, but I also think his leadership in the community will make him an icon for a very long time.
When it comes to status within physics, John would be an All Black, and a very brilliant one.
When I think about the Alumni Award for John, I really feel that it is deserved. He's spent 40 years of his life working really hard. You know, it's fine getting awards overseas, but this is his home, so it's really special.
The fourth Distinguished Alumni Award is presented by third-year PhD student Matthew McNaughton from the Faculty of Science. Matthew is part of the leadership team of the student chapter of the international organisations Optica and SPIE. Last year he was co-chair of Koala, a conference organised for students by students. Welcome Matthew and Distinguished Alumnus John Dudley.
John, why are you a nervous firewalker?
Well, I think firewalking can be explained completely rationally and without any need for superstition or
it's only physics,
pseudoscience. But still, the human spirit is that when you're confronted with 3 meters of glowing embers and flames, something says, I shouldn't really be doing this.
I love that it was presented not as a criticism, but as it was an unusual observation that John should be a nervous firewalker.
Well, Professor Putt's Australian.
Yes, true. In doing our research, I came across this quote I wanted to share with you, John. When John was aged 12, his older sister and her husband used to go to their mother's house every Sunday for dinner. At that time, John and his brother-in-law, who was 24, used to get into such heated discussions over algebraic equations that John's mother had to take her son-in-law aside and urge him not to get John started. Where did that passion, as a 12-year-old arguing with someone twice your age over algebra, come from?
I think the great thing about science and the great thing about physics, and especially because it's seen as like the most annoying part of science, because it's the physicists just don't let anything go without question. And they want to search for absolute truth. And it doesn't matter who you're talking to. If something's wrong, you should learn to accept it, and you should not be afraid. Anyone should be afraid to correct anyone else. And that's something that we see again and again in science, where even some of a great Nobel Prize winner from the early part of the century, he deliberately invited questions from annoying students at the back because he knew that the older ones would be too afraid to ask them questions. So I wasn't really afraid of my brother-in-law, and I'm still not afraid of him.
Well, in the spirit of correcting errors, please do not hold back in correcting me as I try and explain some of your core research here. You have taken the mathematics of how light behaves in optical fibres, and you've found the same equations describing rogue waves in the ocean. Is that correct? Freak waves, the kind of waves that sink ships. And in a sense, that is an extraordinary leap. Two seemingly disconnected things, you have found an intellectual connection, from a laser in a lab to a wave in the middle of the Atlantic. Can you explain that to us?
So again, in the interest of total precision, the results were always out there. They were in the literature discovered in the 1980s, but they'd been forgotten. And so I guess what I did, along with others, is we just rediscovered this correspondence between the light waves and the water waves. But it was at the right time because, meanwhile, the technology in experiments in light waves developed where we could measure them. And it's much easier to measure a freak wave on an optical table out of light than it is to experience one in real life if you're on a boat. It's not dangerous, it's simple, and you can measure millions of them per second. And so you can really understand their properties and characteristics and statistics and work out how likely they are to be dangerous and under what conditions, and then translate the results back to develop some useful information about freak waves on the ocean.
Richard Feynman, one of the great physicists of the 20th century, gave the Sir Douglas Robb lectures here at the University of Auckland. And you played a key role in conserving and then disseminating the original recordings of those Auckland lectures. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience? What does it mean to you that Auckland was the setting, and why was preserving those lectures so important to you?
So Feynman was a character of physics in every sense of the word, and he was a tremendous educator whose particular way of describing physics wasn't always mathematical, although he was a wonderful mathematician, but he developed a physical intuition which has inspired thousands and tens of thousands of physics students since. Now, I saw these lectures sitting as a student at Auckland. They were occasionally played by enthusiastic students, and when I joined the staff as a junior lecturer in 1994, I saw them in a cupboard, and I thought, what on earth is this doing here again? It's still there. And so I realised at that time how historically significant this was, and I thought, well, we can't have this, and I just got them remastered, and then I contacted Feynman's estate, Feynman's children, the executor, and it's kind of like cold calling. It was the beginning of emails, and luckily at the start of the email age, people actually answered them. And so I got responses from the publishers and from the executors, and then luckily many years later I was lucky enough to be invited to the house of his biographer, where I actually saw some of the famous Feynman artefacts in his books and so forth, and it was wonderful.
Well, thank you. Right. On behalf of the many people who I know have savoured being able to go through those lectures and his writings from that time. I didn't realise until yesterday that you also teach a philosophy paper.
I teach philosophy and history of science, yes.
Yeah. So can you talk to us a little bit about the intersection of philosophy and science and why that interests you?
Well, in France, the field is called epistemology. So it's history of ideas, in a way. And I think that we often create a hard boundary between the human sciences and the natural sciences. And I think we're starting to see the consequences of that, and the fact that the two communities are not talking to each other, and there's misunderstanding, and there's doubt about what science is and what it should be. Science isn't a collection of facts or things. It's a method, it's a way of thinking, it's a way of asking questions and systematically trying to develop responses that can be verified by other people independently. And that starts to overlap with what philosophy is, and it's a very concrete kind of philosophy, and I think it's something that we need more and more. We need to be able to ask questions of each other, and we need to use the scientific method. I don't really like that term, but that the idea of testing ideas and looking at evidence and understanding what evidence is. And I'm sure Dame Ellen will have the same kind of problems in the courtroom. It's never easy when human beings are involved. It's easier when you're talking about physics, but we're starting to see questions that overlap all the communities, and I think that's always interested me. And there are also all sorts of things about history and philosophy, but that will take hours. So
we're here.
I'll just...
I know this because about 2 minutes after we met yesterday, I shuddered as I heard the words coming out of my mouth when I asked you, does that mean there can be no such thing as true free will? And I thought, and you said, you're forgetting quantum mechanics. And I thought, here's someone who enjoys sparring with his students, and perhaps by engaging the philosophical side of your interests alongside the physics, you were able to tickle two fancies, as it were. Yeah.
Yes.
What do you think of AI?
Well, I'm doing research in AI at the moment and trying to see how perhaps optical technologies can perhaps replace the silicon-based electronic technologies to reduce the energy footprint of AI systems. AI in general, I think, is a wonderful tool. It allows us to join dots between areas of human knowledge that have been used to train the AI models. But I think it's really important to realise that AI models are trained on a body of knowledge. Now, there may be connections that perhaps we haven't made between the different elements of that body of knowledge. The real problem is that when we think about can we go outside this trained data set to create new knowledge, I think the answer to that is, at the moment, no. And we have to be very careful. The other problem we have is that while for adults, and looking at the age range in this room, I think a certain class of adults, we've all grown up learning how to read and write and critically think on our own, and to review sources and to develop a certain natural skepticism about what we read. The 7- and 8-year-olds right now who are using AI tools haven't had that previous experience, and I worry very deeply about the next 10 years and what's going to happen to children. And I think we need to develop guidelines, maybe even legislation, to limit the use of AI for the youngest cohorts of our children.
For most people, non-linear optics and ultra-fast laser physics is completely impenetrable as a subject matter. But part of what has distinguished you is that you have spent your career arguing the public deserves to understand science. And this hits on what you just mentioned. It's not just a privilege for specialists, even in an age where the relationship between science and the public is arguably under huge strain. So why does that matter to you so much?
Well, I'm going to paraphrase the statement here of a well-known science popularizer from the 1990s, Carl Sagan. And he said that we live in a world that depends more and more on science and technology, yet the public understands science and technology seemingly less and less. And that gulf between the understanding of science and the need to understand science means that the information being transmitted or used to inform decision makers is becoming disconnected in a very dangerous way from the actual facts and the truth. And that is a recipe for disaster. And we've already seen in the last 5 years some indication of that. And it's just going to get worse unless we do something about it. And I think it's an obligation of every scientist, really, to make some effort to improve that connection.
We'll keep fighting the good fight. We so appreciate your efforts, and we so appreciate you being home. Please join me in congratulating Professor John Dudley.
Thanks very much.
Let's meet our next recipient.
Everything we did revolved around sport, but it was about going out there and giving your best. But we also found our joy in sport, and that was a real connection piece for our family.
My earliest memories of Raelene would be us playing sport together, highly competitive sport. She has a lot of grit and determination when she plays, and I think we've seen that play out in her career over the years.
The first big leap was her role with Netball New Zealand. She was the CEO when that game went professional, so what an incredible contribution to look back on.
Raelene's passionate about sport. She's passionate about the impact that sport can have on people's lives, and she's passionate about making people's lives better from high performance because of the fact that it uplifts spirits and makes New Zealanders feel proud. She's equally as passionate about making sure that children who don't otherwise have access to sport do get that access. She is very, very strong on relationships. They are the key and the centre of everything she does.
One of her real superpowers is to bring people to the table that maybe have different new views and then find a way for everyone to work together.
Raelene would be one of the most respected leaders in the sports sector. Raelene is also well recognised globally.
She has a big picture view of the world. As many people would describe her as a visionary. She can think about things that are evolving, not just this week, this month, or this year, but maybe next decade.
She really cares about people, and the work she does is about people and with people.
She's a good human. You know, she looks out for people. She treats anyone that comes into her world with the same kind of respect and curiosity.
It's difficult to catch Raelene relaxing, but you can guarantee there is a beach, a batch, a beanbag and a book. And quite often you'll find a glass of bubbles too.
Tonight's final award is presented by Elizabeth Buchanan from the Faculty of Business and Economics. Along with her business studies, Elizabeth has a rising cricket career. She represented New Zealand at the Under-19 Women's World Cup in Malaysia and has a contract with Auckland Hearts, Auckland's premier women's cricket team. Please welcome Elizabeth and Distinguished Alumna Raelene Castle.
Raelene, you are the daughter of two extraordinary athletes. Your dad, Bruce, captained the Kiwis. Your mum, Marlene, medalled 3 times in 3 Commonwealth Games in lawn bowls. What did they teach you about competition? I hate to think what ball games night was like at your place.
Yes, quite competitive. Actually, they're both here tonight, which is very special. It was that competing was important, preparing was important. You had to give it your best, but you also had to be very respectful of that environment. And it didn't matter where, how many competitions, but ensuring that you left all that you possibly could on the field or on the court. That was really important.
You were a representative level netball player, a tennis player, a New Zealand bowls champion yourself. What is the risk that moving your focus into the business of sport dilutes the love you have for the game?
Well, the fortunate thing is that it gives you completely the opposite opportunity, I think. I often say it's very nice to get paid to stand around the water cooler on any given Monday morning and analyse the weekend sports results. So the fact that you can actually live it every day, you can live your passion, but then you can really start to get in behind the scenes. You get to understand the people, the personalities, the trials, the tribulations, how genuinely difficult it is to be a high-performance athlete, how we're dealing with the very 1% of the greatest New Zealanders, and the work that High Performance Sport New Zealand does to help those people be at that absolute level. So for me, it's been an absolute great honour to have been part of that journey for many athletes, but also supporting the great volunteers that are out in our environments, making and delivering great experiences for young people on any given, Saturday, Sunday or any day of the week.
2007, you were driving down the road, you had the car radio on, and in the news they said the CEO of Netball New Zealand had resigned. What did you do?
By about that end of that night, I'd made about 7 phone calls to people that I knew that were connected into that role. And, having built up a network of relationships over a business career, I had some people that were connected and said, I feel like this is the job, and if I could get into the process and onto the list and maybe put my case forward, that would be a dream come true, to bring a business experience into a sport that was so loved by New Zealanders, would bring the best of my skill set together. And so to be able to have gone through that process, but importantly because of those connections, I managed to get into that process.
And to foster in that professional era, what did that mean for young women athletes in New Zealand in particular?
Well, it changed their lives. I mean, overnight, it literally changed their lives. And to have really in a team sport context, we had many Olympians that were making money, but for a team sport female athlete to have an opportunity to be able to be successful, to still study but actually get paid to travel trans-Tasman across Australia and New Zealand. And it's not just the players, it's the coaches, it's the physios, it's the doctors, it's the sports administrators, it's all of that ecosystem that grew so significantly over that time. A lot of people with a lot of dedicated passion to actually bring all those moving parts together, a broadcaster that stepped in and believed in women's sport. And suddenly if all of those different parts can see it, they can be it. And I think that was ultimately the piece that was so game-changing.
You've said something I really like, that you are not afraid to employ people who are much smarter than you, which I suspect has a degree of modesty attached, but is also very wise. It's an unusual thing for a leader to say out loud, though. Why do you do that?
Well, I don't think it should be unusual, because certainly as you get to these types of CEO roles, you can't be the specialist in everything that you're responsible for. So to have the people around you that are smarter than you, that are subject matter experts, that ultimately might replace you, that will be the next CEO, that's, in my experience, what good leaders look like. That's what good leadership looks like. So I was fortunate enough to observe that in some of the people that I worked with and in and around, and those are the types of people that I've tried to model my career on. And the job of the leader is to build the culture, to build the environment, to make sure that you can bring all those personalities together to maximise that group of people and make sure they can be successful together. You don't have to have all the answers. The team hopefully has all the answers.
You have been, in succession, the first female CEO of Netball New Zealand, the first female CEO of an NRL club, which I can imagine was a different experience, the first female CEO of Rugby Australia, and the first female CEO of Sport New Zealand. That is a remarkable pattern. But you have also said that you never explicitly set out to smash the patriarchy. So is the key to smashing the patriarchy not trying to smash the patriarchy?
Well, I didn't ever apply for the Bulldogs job because I thought, gee, the headline will be the first female CEO. I applied because it was a career step. I'd had a connection with rugby league through Dad for, all my life. It was a challenge. It was something that would be incredibly rewarding to have that opportunity. So that was the main reasons. I didn't think, gee, that will be the headline. So in some ways I find it surprising that people make it such a big deal. And the test is that suddenly for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, you're the first female CEO, and then suddenly that title disappears and you just end up being the CEO of the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. So that's really the test, that you've dropped that title of being female and you're just one of the other CEOs that's sitting around the tables.
I want to ask you about Rugby Australia. Your time ended there in 2020, I think. You oversaw the Israel Folau dismissal, which was one of the most divisive moments in Australian sport in a generation. Your own chairman, Paul McLean, said you had endured abhorrent treatment from a section of the rugby establishment who didn't want you there. You've spoken about death threats, you've spoken about the toll, and yet you've said that if you'd been told in advance that that is how hard it would be, you would still do it again. Why?
Because the positives so by far and away outweigh the negatives, and I think that the great people, the friends that you make, the opportunity to move an organisation forward. Unfortunately, sometimes the difficult times make the headlines, but as a leader, you also take so much out of those difficult times. You learn a lot. I never thought that I would end up being a case study in universities around the world, but that's what's happened. The Israel Folau saga has been looked at from one angle, another angle, a religious angle, a contractor angle, a social media angle, a professional athlete angle. There's so many learnings that, why wouldn't you challenge yourself to step into those trials and tribulations? So, for me, it was just one enormous adventure, and the fact that, yes, there were some tough times, but across all of my career in sport, by far and away, Greg and I have had amazing experiences and opportunities and made great friends. I feel incredibly honoured.
Yeah. I mean, it is a brave thing for anyone to put themselves in the position you put yourself in. I think for a lot of leaders, the easier thing would just be to hope that the headlines go away in a few days' time and not necessarily take a stand. Do you feel like you did the right thing?
Yes, because I think there was the short story is, end of the day, very simple. Employment contract, breached employment contract, have to stand up for the values of your organisation in that. At a different level, I'm a CEO, I have to provide a safe working environment. I think that's really important. And I absolutely believe deeply in equity and inclusion. And it's something that, throughout my own career, I've stood up for a lot, because I just think it's the way society should be. And that was a moment where I could stand up for something I really believed in and stand up for it strongly. So, it was deeply challenging, the media, the press conferences, all of those things. But that wasn't the thing. It's the piece that how ultimately it will be viewed because of the stance that the organisation took.
You're on the right side of history, as it were. How do you deal with that stuff? How do you deal with that scrutiny? Do you have any tricks?
I do. Is largely don't read social media commentary.
100%.
And I was only talking to a group of young athletes during the week, and it's in some ways it's an amazing tool. At the other hand, no one said you have to go past the photo and actually look at the commentary. When you're dealing with a very significant issue, you need someone else to read it for you so that they're giving you a précis of what it means and what the indications are. But have a group of trusted advisors that do give you the truth, that do tell you when you've got something wrong, that you can go to for advice. Those are the people ultimately that will help you make good decisions. Trying to run a business through social media feedback is not something I'd advise. That might see you end up in a whole lot of difficult situations.
It occurs to me that being a kid today is really tough, but really, really difficult, in no small part because of social media. How important is sport in the lives of New Zealand kids today relative to when you were sparring off with your mum and dad and your brother?
I'm not sure it's that different, to be honest. I think the fundamentals of it still stay the same. It's community, it's engagement, it's a chance to prove yourself or test yourself in an environment. It's about how you feel positively in an environment where mental health is such a big challenge for our young people. They can go out for 30 minutes, an hour, whatever, and be disconnected from devices. They can actually be involved with their friends and having fun and enjoying environments and situations. So at a community level, we know the value of the health and wellness of it. It makes a fundamental difference into our communities right across New Zealand. And then when we see our New Zealanders be successful on the world stage, we're proud. We're proud New Zealanders. We like seeing that. And for a country that only has 5 million people, we end up 11th on the medal table and number 2 per head of population. I mean, that's extraordinary for a country that's very small. And it is what holds New Zealanders up. It's what politicians talk about as being one of the real positives for New Zealand.
Your friend Claudine says you are an amazing cook. Your brother, totally independently, having not talked with Claudine, says, quote, she's an incredible master chef. It was the thing that kept coming back in our research. But apparently you are one of these people who, if you've never tried a recipe before and you've got 10 people coming around for a dinner, says, you know what, I'm going to do the crock and boche tonight. Why would you do that? What does that say about your appetite for risk?
Probably quite a lot. I don't know. I'm fortunate to live in Auckland, I suppose, and that's my creative outlet. That's a way for me I enjoy feeding people and seeing the joy on their faces when they're having something, sitting around together, sharing a great glass of wine and sharing stories. And the worst case, if it doesn't work, you can Uber Eats. Right? It's okay. It doesn't, sometimes it's okay.
Words to live by. Please join me in congratulating Raelene Castle. I've got a couple of questions for each of you, and then we're all going to retire and go enjoy some refreshments and snacks downstairs. So, Ellen, I'm going to begin with you. Can you give us a vision of a different life, a fantasy? Is there another subject you maybe wish you'd studied, or if you had your time again, you might have nosed around? Is there something else you could have been entertained by?
It's hard to think of it because I've, really enjoyed what I have done. But my siblings are all very creative, and there's an attraction to that side of things. So possibly a writer. I keep, I've got the first paragraph of the detective novel, but I. So maybe
alongside all of those customised Christmas crackers, as it were.
That's right.
Yeah. Reuben, another life, another career, another pursuit.
In the lead, my mother and father suggested I choose a practical job, and I did, and it was a primary school teacher. And I did this for 2 years, and I would very gladly jump back into being a primary school teacher, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
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 What did you love about it?
I was teaching in the year 2000, and the real value was men being teaching our little ones in primary schools. I thought that was incredible. And I was teaching in there was a bilingual unit within that school. So this was the very first years that Te Reo Māori was being introduced to education. And I think seeing the power of students go through an entirely Te Reo Māori language system now, and seeing how they're coming out is the champion of education and the vision of an incredible future.
Yeah.
So I just see the power of it.
Raelene, another pursuit, another passion that you would indulge?
Probably fashion.
I've heard you've got a mean shoe collection and you're showing off tonight, frankly.
Yeah, I think it's something I've always been really interested in, and it forms so much about one's personality, the opportunity, and the fact that now in 2026 you can be yourself in what you wear and how you present yourself. So I think that would have been a really interesting area to be involved in.
Designing?
Possibly. I'd probably have my mum, who's here tonight, used to sew, so I would design, she would sew. I can't sew.
Yeah.
She would save me. And probably through a lot of my career I've also done that. And designing would be a big stretch of, at that level, but certainly of the things that suit me would be something I'd be interested in.
Very good. John?
Well, I think Professor Putt mentioned that I used to do the physics department annual pantomime, and there was a photo up there I was quite surprised to see, but I've always liked to introduce aspects of theatre into the way I teach, and I think that's one of the ways it's effective. And I've always liked to entertain, so I think maybe a stand-up comic would be an idea.
Well, you have a captive audience if you've got some material you've been working on, John.
Well, perhaps not in the style of Jimmy Carr, but it could be fun.
Yeah. Oh, very good. All right, one last question for each of you, and then everyone is free. So, John, can you think about yourself when you were studying? Go back over the years. If you could come down from wherever and whisper into John, the student's ear, what advice would you give him?
Study the things you love. That's kind of the platitude answer, right? And I think we all study the things you're passionate about, and I think that's obvious. But don't be afraid to try something a little bit different at the fringes of what people are telling you. If you've got some internal little inkling to say, well, maybe I'll study business, but I like fashion. So one of the great advantages of the New Zealand education system, which is different to many other countries, is that in the first years of your study, you can choose something a little bit outside your major area. And I would say do that.
That's great advice, yeah. Raelene, what advice would you offer?
Probably that not don't have to be necessarily an A+ student to go on and find the ultimate career that you're really looking for. I certainly was not. I was more like a B and C kind of result person. And, that's other skills, it's other capabilities, it's other experiences. It might be drama, it might be sport, it might be leadership opportunities you find elsewhere. That's the combination of the education with the other experiences is actually what ultimately rounds out the individual.
Yeah, very good. Reuben?
I think it would be you made a great decision to follow your heart, and you made a great decision to choose something that brings you joy, to share joy.
And Alan? What advice would you offer?
I think I'd say don't be afraid to take up opportunities that come your way, whether it's, studying something different, or if someone comes along and says, well, you can intern here or whatever it is. Don't let that sort of fear of failure or fear of not sure how you'll go with something. Just forget about that and kia kaha, do it.
Very good. On that note, thank you all for being here with us this evening, and congratulations. I'm going to ask you all to please join me in celebrating and congratulating the University of Auckland Waipapa Taumataro's 2026 Distinguished Alumni, Justice Dame Ellen France, Reuben Paterson, Professor John Dudley, and Raelene Castle. Righto, it is almost time for us to go and stretch our legs to enjoy some canapes and a bit of a refreshment. Very quickly, I just want to thank Waipapa Taumataro, the University of Auckland, for having me again this year. I have had the great privilege of hosting Taumata a couple of times now, and it is honestly just such a joy. I sincerely don't think we do nearly enough celebrating in our lives. I know I said that at the start, but whether it's birthdays or the extraordinary achievements of our friends and colleagues, I think Taumata provides us a great opportunity to get together and celebrate. We're going to go downstairs in a few minutes' time, but to close out this evening, we have a performance from a University of Auckland student and alumna, Mila Solto and Jodie Russell. Please welcome React Studio.
That completes the Alumni Awards event for 2026. Please join us in the main atrium to congratulate our newest distinguished alumni and enjoy the refreshments and company. Ka kite anō.